In this circle of care, we make space for the complexity of life, the myriad experiences that bless and break our hearts. The truth of human experience dictates that on any given day, we each come to the table with hearts in different places. It is especially so on this day, invented to honor women who nurture. In this circle of care, we honor the truth that mothering is not, and never will be, quantified in one single descriptor. Mothering can be exquisite or infuriating, fulfilling or confusing, commonplace or triumphant. It exists in the everyday experiences of each person. There is no human being that is not connected to or disconnected from a mother. And so we honor the complexity of experience, writ large in flowered platitudes, but here in this space, laid bare, honoring the truth in each of our hearts. There is room for all in this circle. If you have carried a child or children, whether or not they came to be born, we see you. If you have fervently wished to do so, and the circumstances of fate made it impossible, we see you. If you love children we cannot see, whether because of death or estrangement, we see you. If you never wanted to be a mother, we see you. If you are happy to mother other people's children as an educator, an auntie, or a foster parent, we see you. If your mother hurt you, physically or emotionally, we see you. If you had no mother at all, we see you. If your mother is or was your best friend, we see you. If your gender says you are not a mother, and yet you take on the role of nurturer, we see you. If you wonder whether your mothering has been enough, we see you. And if yours is a different truth altogether, we honor your unspoken story. There is room for all in this circle. May it be so today and always. Now, this week in the news has been a hard one to reconcile with the celebration of mothers and families. Information leaked from the Supreme Court indicates the overturning of a landmark case, Roe v. Wade, which has set the precedent of importance of privacy when making medical decisions, including and especially for reproductive health, is likely. We know from history that when abortions are illegal, it doesn't mean they stop happening. It means women are faced with an unjust set of hurdles that jeopardize their safety, finances, and freedom to care for their bodies and their families the way they have a right to decide. Motherhood is a blessing and a necessity for the survival of the human race, but it should never be forced upon someone who feels unprepared, unable, or unwilling. As we celebrate those who have chosen to raise our next generation, let us also hold up those who have decided, for whatever reason, that the time and place that pregnancy found them was not right for them. And it does not have to be an extreme set of circumstances. The decision of whether to carry a child belongs solely to the body charged with the carrying. To pass precedents and legislation saying otherwise is an unconscionable strike against basic human rights and religious freedoms. And I think that is part of why we come to church. To come together with both our celebrations and our sorrows, to stand firmly behind our principles that include the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to live their lives in the best way that only they know how, to know that there is not just one right path, and there is room for everyone in this loving community. I now invite you to rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, number 191 in the Great Hymnal. Now I recall my childhood, verses 1 and 2.
recall my childhood when the sun first you guide and sparkling the days to rise. Within the forest, moving through these strong. Flowers bursting fresh within my darkest shade. And looking on the world with simple joy, my insects, birds, and beasts, and flying weeds, the grass and clouds and all is welcome home. My mother's voice gave meaning to the storm.
We are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. We welcome you to share your joys and sorrows by writing them down on the card you find on your chair and placing it in the basket when it comes by, or by typing in the chat box on Zoom. Know that whatever your heart is holding today, whether shared or not, we are with you. Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts support our church in its work. That work is summarized in our covenant. The covenant for UUCC says, in service of the values that unite us, we will recognize the inherent value of each person, foster a community of compassion and caring for all, value our diverse opinions, and engage respectfully in all interactions. 1/4 of our play collection for blooming season goes to the Finger Lakes Land Trust, an organization that protects forests, farmlands, gorges, and shorelines in the Finger Lakes region of New York by creating public nature preserves. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket, or if you're joining us from home, by visiting canandaigua.org/connection/donate, or mailing a check to UUCC at 3024 Cooley Road, Canandaigua, New York, 14424. In either case, make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering. Okay, it's time now for joys and sorrows. I'm not sure if we have any from Zoom or not. Nope, none from Zoom. Okay, we have two joys to share. Gigi shares with us that she had a lovely day celebrating Mother's Day with our kids and grandkids yesterday. And Oren is sharing that his big joy is Mother's Day and Rubik's Cubes. Okay, and now I'll drop a stone in the water for these and all the joys and sorrows left in the silence of our hearts. Whatever is in your heart today, we are with you. And now it's time to send the child. So we have only one today. So if you'd like to join Michelle downstairs, Warren.
Oh, now we take us all together.
Now is the time in our service where we invite you to get more comfortable in your seats, to rest your feet on the floor, take a deep breath, and let the worries of the world fall from your shoulders. Before we pause for a minute in quiet reflection, I'd like to share with our prayer for parenting in a pandemic. This is a prayer for parenting in a pandemic, a prayer for the dirty laundry and piled up dishes, a prayer for dance parties and cuddle puddles, for long walks and improvised science experiments, for screen time as education and distraction. This is a prayer for working parents Zooming another meeting with a little face joining in, for new parents waiting for new life without support, for the single parents doing all this alone, for parents who are on the front lines and essential workers who worry every day about being away from home, about bringing something home, about holding it all together as you hold the world together. This is a prayer for the more than 2,000 meals you've made, for the 100 millionth time you've heard, "Can I have a snack?" For the 5 minutes of alone time you can speak out every day, for the 2, 4, 6, 60 gray hairs you've acquired so far. This is a prayer for the meltdowns, the missed naps, the many, many tears, the distance learning homework no one wants to do, but still somehow feel the need to fight about. This is a prayer for wondering if they will ever fall asleep, for wondering if they will ever get up. A prayer for pretending that you're enjoying yourself when you all play your favorite game. This is a prayer for all the missed milestones, for holding your child as they cry over missing their friends, missing their prom, missing their graduation, for your own tears because you can't fix this problem. This is for all the milestones still marked, the public birthday party parades, and Zoom proms hosted by celebrities, the family celebrations of learning to walk, the first lost tooth, the private, personal celebrations of the many ways you watched your children grow and mature right close up. This prayer is for all the newly formed family bands and midday pajama-clad dance parties, for all the backyard bathing, for the new trampolines, new bikes, new play structures, a prayer for inside obstacle courses and learning to make new crafts, for all the pets that have joined new families. This is a prayer for bonding and breaking, for togetherness and too much togetherness. This is a prayer for love, for anger, for grief, for time out of time. This is a prayer for parenting in a pandemic. Amen. When thinking about a service appropriate to celebrate and honor mothers, it seemed a little bit wrong to ask a mother to take on the task. So instead, we asked 5. Thank you all for agreeing to share a glimpse into your journeys and experiences as mothers. Because of all of the new technology we've learned over the past couple years, we have 2 mothers who pre-recorded their messages. And for you here at church, you can see them up on the screen to the right. And then 3 will be coming and joining us here at the microphone. Our first message will be from Megan Cabral, joining us on video.
Hello, my name is Megan Cabral, and I was asked to speak a little bit about the experience of having a baby. During the COVID-19 pandemic. Our little charmer, Paula Roberto, was born on November 4th, 2021 at Thompson here in Canandaigua. And thankfully everything went fairly smoothly, or at least as smoothly as things can go when you have a baby. Unlike those who gave birth in hospitals earlier in the pandemic, or anybody who tested positive for COVID right before giving birth, I was allowed to have a support person and I did not have to wear a mask. We actually were also allowed to have a visitor after the baby was born. COVID did put a slight kink in our plans leading up to birth, however, when my brother, who lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but works remote and was gonna come stay with our daughter, Maria, who's 3 years old, when her brother was born, called a few days before he was scheduled to fly out to tell us that his husband, Lou, had tested positive for COVID. He never had more than mild symptoms, thankfully, but we were all devastated. It was supposed to be precious time for my brother James and Maria to bond, and of course for James to be here after the baby was born. He and Lou were fortunate enough to be able to isolate from each other, and James pushed his flight back a week, and we all just sort of held our breath and hoped for the best. I did also call our neighbors who had agreed to be our backup Maria team and let them know that it was now much more likely that they would get a midnight call to come and watch her. And lo and behold, at 2 a.m. on November 4th, my husband, Paulo, did have to make that phone call that it was time for baby Paulo's arrival and we needed them to come over. They were great. They came right over, took care of everything for Maria that weekend. This included a small car seat fiasco, and if you've ever had the pleasure of installing a car seat for the first time, you know how fun this was in the early morning hours. Paulo and I had gone to the hospital at different times and in separate cars. And when we forgot to leave the car seat at the house, so that Maria could get to daycare in the morning, our neighbor called asking what to do. Our neighbor works at the hospital, so we arranged for him to arrive early, call Paulo when he got there, so Paulo could get him our car key so that he could then install the car seat in their car to get Maria to daycare. I kid you not, literally minutes before Paulo was born, and while I was actively pushing, my husband Paulo's phone rang, and he looked at me and said, "I have to take this, it's John about the car seat." I was not happy, mostly out of vanity and not wanting our neighbor to hear me as I was laboring hard, but he of course had to take the call and get the keys to John. Everything worked out though. Our baby was born, Maria got to daycare. Our neighbor never admitted to hearing anything in the birthing room during that phone call, and we lived to tell the tale. My brother James arrived the following day, COVID-free, just hours after we returned home from the hospital, and we all got to enjoy some wonderful family cocooning time thereafter. Many other mothers, though, do not have such light and comical stories about having babies during the pandemic. And my experience, if anything, has highlighted for me yet again the layers upon layers of privilege that I have, both societal and by chance. Living in a wealthier nation, I had earlier access to vaccines than a mother living in, say, Haiti, and could thus protect myself from the heightened risk for COVID complications during pregnancy. I was also blessed with the timing to get the entire 3-shot vaccine series during this pregnancy, and could hope to pass on some immunity to my baby, which not everybody could do. He did end up getting COVID at only 2 months old, and I have to believe that the vaccine helped him handle it pretty well for an infant. I've talked to mothers who have had to wear a mask while laboring, and they said it was awful. They had not a single support person in the room other than the hospital staff. There are moms who have had to get bad news on an ultrasound or at a doctor's appointment or even in the birthing room without a support person there. I have talked to mothers who have had to set difficult boundaries with family and friends who refuse to get vaccinated so that they can protect their children. There are mothers who have struggled with postpartum depression and anxiety in isolation, who've been stuck at home without a friend or family member to take the baby for a while as they catch up on sleep, which they so sorely need. Or even to watch as they hold that precious bundle of joy for the first time. So to those mothers who have had to confront pregnancy, loss, birth, and mothering of babies during this pandemic, and to all mothers today, my heart goes out to you. You are rock stars and superheroes, and at the same time, just everyday people doing the best you can with what you've got. Happy Mother's Day.
Our next mother I'll invite forward is Carrie Brown. Okay, can you hear me with the song or should I take it off? Take it off. So when Eileen and Danielle asked me to do this and said I could record it or do it here, I couldn't think of anything worse than doing it here other than seeing myself on the video doing it, but having to hear myself. So I chose a person. So I just worked on this for about an hour, so I apologize if it's short too long or totally meaningless. So a few weeks ago, a memory came up in my phone from 2020, and it was a video of Women I know them, they're a little different now, but they made a video from Mrs. Ferris, the children's librarian at Wood Library. She had been reading stories on YouTube since the world had closed a couple weeks earlier. We missed her. They stood side by side, waving real awkwardly at you with smiling. Hi, Mrs. Ferris. Seeing this video took my breath away because The first thing I thought when I pressed play was, look how small they are, they're so cute. You know, and that's when it hit me, they're not small anymore. One is entering middle school next year, and the other one moved from primary to elementary. They went from little kids to big kids during the pandemic. And my youngest even said to me, I don't remember not learning this very well. It was so long ago in his mind, I can't remember. And he's 8 now, so he was 6, and I didn't really think that was a good thing. But how many memories do you guys have from kindergarten? Probably not many, you know. So what I saw as a temporary and fleeting situation was actually a huge chunk of my kid's childhood. All the memories of the last 2 years are the memories of their childhood. They were period with them until they died, the pandemic memories. So what are those exactly? We made a bunny cake that first Easter. I don't ever have time to bake, ever. I tried a dozen new crock pot recipes. We took up painting, rocks, paper, canvases, whatever. We hiked a lot. It was kind of nice at first. Sorry. It was kind of nice at first getting to do all this stuff together. As the spring flowers began poking their first stalks through the gray, crinkled leafless leaves of the soil that winter had been battering for 6 months. We slowed down to a manageable pace for once. We found our passions. We marveled at how busy we'd been before. We enjoyed that time to some extent until we didn't. Once we were rested and filled our buckets and felt ready to rejoin the outside world, there was still a pandemic. So we had to learn to live under those conditions and to choose what was worth risking our children's lives over and what wasn't. Early on, it became clear to us that our children needed their friends, that their lives without any friends were quite literally not worth living, even for a short period. We chose certain families, as many people did, to become part of our pod, a new word at the time that has now become commonplace. My parents agreed to see us outside, so we did a lot of hiking with my mom, but my dad is handicapped, so there wasn't a lot of outdoor time with him. And the relationship with my parents became quite fractured as we navigated winter and had Thanksgiving and Christmas without them. Soon the kids would not be little anymore, and yet there was still a pandemic. A lot happened over the next 2 years. Family members died without fanfare, without goodbyes. Pets were adopted, pets died. As the months wore on, I continued to try and make the best of it, but my nerves were wearing thin. Isolation with your family has a way of shining a bright light on all the holes in relationships. For some couples, the relationships were strengthened. That was not the case for us. And eventually we had to parent our children through a separation during the pandemic. I'm happy to report, however, that everyone's doing pretty well now in general. I was able to eventually get Dylan into the services he needed despite the pandemic and the total lack of adequate healthcare in this country, especially for children. And because of that, we had a lot of therapy during the pandemic. In our family, functional therapy started the day after I moved out. Our therapist helped us work through all of the difficult adjustments, and thankfully they have a father who truly, truly loves them. It's their best and trust first. Liam did go through some very angry periods pre and post separation, but he seems to have leveled out at this point. However, it doesn't change the fact that 2 years of their lives were essentially on hold, and those 2 years on hold for that chalks up to a significant chunk of their existence. It may have possibly ruined hockey for Dylan, who won't be playing again next year. And yes, of course, I'm secretly happy to only have one hockey, but I will miss them. I'll miss watching them play. And I realized that this is their major childhood trauma so far. This is the thing their generation is carrying, the pandemic and its aftermath. There's nothing I can do about that but share their load and hope that they're able to move through any trauma that they face in their lives going forward. I wish it hadn't been compounded by a separation, but another thing I realized mothering through this is that my happiness matters too. Not just to me, but to them and their well-being. I'd say that typing this in May of 2022 that we look different as a family, but we've been able to thrive regardless. However, this pandemic isn't over yet. So as far as mothering through it, I'll let you know.
Our next mother is Jill Karemba, joining us by video.
Good morning. If you've ever parented teenagers, and even if you haven't, you know that on a good day it tests your patience and your nurturing abilities. When the pandemic started, my kids were 13 and 15. One of them was just finishing up 8th grade, and the other was finally finding their groove as a freshman in high school. The first few months were a challenge that we were willing to take on. The kids felt like they had a break from school, and we set ridiculous goals for ourselves. I set ridiculous goals for ourselves. We were going to hike every day. We were going to learn how to knit and bake, read all the books, do all the things. And we did play board games. We took turns making meals. We watched the entire Star Wars saga. And so summer came, and we knew this was going to last much more than a couple of weeks and months. And hearing the news was heartbreaking. Innocent people were dying. George Floyd and many other brown and black people were being murdered. The feelings of anxiety and anger and guilt were difficult to process. And they were also difficult for our teenagers to process. To be honest with you, we didn't know how to navigate that with them. We couldn't just explain it at a high level and then distract them with books and toys and activities like we could when they were little. Our kids were engaged and curious, and it was just as confusing to them, and they were just as angry as we were. While I was honored to be a part of their life and help it to unpack these crazy days, I know they missed out on the opportunity to hang out with peers and friends to work through all of these issues. I'm worried about the rest of their high school career. I'm worried about college and beyond. Will they know how to live with other people? Will they survive in the wilderness on their own? And I know, trust me, these are questions that every parent has had about their teenager. And all that we can do is trust and let go and just love them. The next school year came, and we made a family decision to have our kids learn remotely from home. And unfortunately for them, they were not allowed to take any AP or honors courses. My husband and I were lucky to be able to continue working from home. And so we would all go to our respective offices during the day and then meet up for dinner at the end of the day. The first few months I can remember pretty vividly, but then after that, things are fuzzy. I just know we went to work, we did laundry, we cleaned the house, we made meals. We weren't thriving, but we were just getting through it. We are so fortunate to have spent this quality time with our kids, and I have gotten to know them more than if we had been driving them from activity to activity. And while I know this was precious time spent with them, my heart breaks knowing that they've missed out on sleepovers and parties and school clubs and activities where they would have learned how to navigate relationships as young adults. We didn't celebrate big milestone birthdays and holidays like we normally would, just like all of you. But we did manage to take a couple of short trips and a big trip out west to explore some national parks. And those are memories that we will treasure. So, teenagers, pandemic or not, I'll keep trusting and letting go and just loving them. Happy Mother's Day.
I'd like to invite Laura to come up next.
My children have never been to this church, so I'm gonna describe that quickly. All of my children are adults. My eldest is Brooke, she is 30 and lives in Rochester with her partner Emily. Next is my son Oliver, and he's 28 and lives in California with his wife Lauren. My youngest is Graham, who's 26, and he lives in Victor with his wife. My children have been out of the house since well before the pandemic started. And luckily, my children have no underlying chronic health conditions right now. So I didn't have more than normal worries about them contracting COVID. In fact, I've been grateful and more than a little guilty when I hear about the challenges that other parents have had to navigate, like remote schooling, closed daycare centers, and I recognize that parenting during COVID was much easier for me than for many. However, I was asked to reflect on parenting during COVID in the theme of cultivating wild tenacity. So I'm here to take a try. When my children were young and started having friends over for play dates and sleepovers, I automatically, and I think naturally, included their friends within the scope of my parenting responsibilities. Whether it was a handful of goldfish crackers or dinner, a place to play for a few hours or overnight, a listening ear, a different perspective. If they wanted or needed nurturing help, I could do it, I was happy to be there. And the scope of this parenting instinct has expanded over time to include people in an ever-widening circle. And I think many people can relate to this phenomenon. My circle includes my children's partners now, their partner's family, their siblings, my friends' children, and so on. For example, the daughter of my best friend from high school did her quarantine before her freshman year at RIT at my house. So she was with us for 10 days and I parented her. It's really one of the most rewarding activities in my life. After feeding someone, giving them a ride or a bed, or just caring attention, often enough, I've been gratified to hear that afterwards, to hear that my offer, if not the actual assistance, made all the difference to the person needing the help. And while what they needed help with usually didn't require a lot from me, it significantly contributed to their base, knowing that they had resources to lean on. My support cultivated their wild tenacity, as it were. So how does this relate to COVID? Well, I am one of the people responsible for developing and implementing Mercurial Center's response to the pandemic. I conduct contact tracing when there's a positive case at school. I notify people when they've been exposed, answer questions, and provide guidance to people in all things COVID. I keep up with all the Department of Health and CDC guidelines. I talked to hundreds of staff people and parents since COVID began. Many of the people I've talked to were experiencing real fear about the disease and its consequences on their lives and their loved ones. And many were also under tremendous stress, panicking about COVID-related issues like quarantining family members and remote schooling and paying the bills amongst closed daycares. It was my job to give information and connect people to resources. But I also find myself giving them perspective, reassurance, and compassionate listening, the same things I offer to those young people in my parenting circle. And I was really surprised to see and hear how that support made the difference for people calling COVID hotline. Staff people thanked me, and I heard about how much it meant to them and their coworkers that they could call me and get the information, the current information that was important to them, and help them figure out their COVID issues. They built renewed confidence and restored tenacity and took that with them into the school hallways and the classrooms. And it made our school community stronger. At least they knew that they could come to me for answers. So as I reflect on parenting during COVID, I now have a greater appreciation for how important it is to draw that circle of parenting wider and wider and wider. And I have a deeper understanding of how support for each individual contributes to the collective mental health and tenacity of a community, whether it's school or here. So happy moms, parents on.
And next, I'd like to invite Lynn over here. Well, in some ways, our pandemic grandparenting may have been easier than for some other grandparents I know. We didn't have any decisions to make as to whether to get together on a holiday or a birthday. I've talked to people who had to see their grandchildren at a distance on the yard and couldn't hug them, and how traumatic that was. We didn't have that problem. Our grandchildren and children were on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. So none of us could cross that, and even if we had wanted to. My oldest daughter and her family all got COVID in the fall of 2020. They all seemed to get over it, although our 11-year-old granddaughter began to have symptoms of anxiety, eating issues, and OCD several months later. Who knows if that was due to COVID itself, the required isolation, remote learning, or a combination of all three. We did finally manage to get to Denmark in the spring of 2021 to see everyone after 17 months. It was a complicated trip trying to figure out COVID requirements that were changing daily. Every country had different rules. Then this last fall, my other daughter and family got COVID, and while both families seem to have recovered, we can't help but wonder whether my granddaughter would have learned to deal with the cause of her ongoing issues more easily if the pandemic had not exacerbated things. And it's still really difficult being far away from that family where we can't offer a hand and a day or some hours easily. We are just back from Denmark, and COVID rules, while easing, are still complicated. Every country has slightly different requirements, and no place is COVID-free, and isn't going to be for a long time, if ever. So while COVID prevented us from seeing our family for some time, we are still able to see them. And for the time when that was not possible, we say thank goodness for FaceTime.
Thank you again to all of the mothers for sharing your stories. And thank you for all of the work that goes unseen, unnoticed, but not really unseen or unnoticed. Always appreciated, even if people are quiet about it. I now invite you all to rise in body or in spirit to join in our closing hymn, number 409 in the great hymnal, Sleep, My Child.
Sleep, my child, and please attend to all through the night. I who love you shall be near all through the night. Stop the drowsy hours of freedom, will and veil in slumber sleep. My loving will to keep me all through the night. Mother, I can feel you all through the night. Father, I know you and hear me all through
Please join me in our words for extinguishing the chalice. If you don't know them by heart, they can be found at number 456 at the back of the great hymnal. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.